When my daughter-in-law told me the greatest gift for our wedding would be if you disappeared from our family, I didn't answer. I just stood there, holding the tray of sweets I'd made for her, and smiled. It wasn't a real smile. It was the kind of smile you wear when your heart begins to crack. But you don't want anyone to see it happen. I remember the silence that followed. It wasn't angry, just empty. Like all the sounds in the house suddenly stopped breathing. Even the ticking clock on the wall felt too loud. That was the moment I realized I no longer belonged in my own home. My name is Asha. I'm 58 years old. For most of my life, I believed family was everything. I believed if you gave enough love, cooked enough meals, forgave enough mistakes, then your home would always stay full of laughter. I was wrong. My husband, Rajesh, passed away 8 years ago. Heart attack. He was the kind of man who never missed a morning prayer. Never left the house without kissing my forehead. And always said, "Family is the only real wealth, Asha." After he was gone, that sentence stayed with me like a prayer I didn't stop repeating. I told myself, be strong. Be patient. Your son still needs you. And for a while, that was true. My son, Arjun, was my reason to wake up every morning. He was studying architecture back then, quiet, brilliant, the kind of boy who noticed when my hands trembled while pouring tea. He would take the kettle and say, "I got it, Ma." We had our little world, small, but peaceful. Until he met Ria. The first time he mentioned her, I saw something light up in his eyes. A spark I hadn't seen in years. He said, "Ma, she's different. You'll love her." And I wanted to, truly, I did. When they first came to visit, I remember how nervous I was. I wore my best sari, made Arjun's favorite dishes, and kept checking the mirror like a young girl about to meet her in-laws. Ria walked in with a smile that could charm anyone. Beautiful. Confident, the kind of woman who makes every room feel brighter. I liked her instantly. She called me auntie at first, polite, formal. But I thought, that's okay. It takes time. I could never have guessed how much distance that one word would hold in the years to come. In the beginning, things were lovely. She would help me in the kitchen sometimes, ask me about my recipes, even call me when they were out to say, "Auntie, Arjun forgot his wallet again." I laughed a lot those days. I felt young again, useful, needed. But slowly, things began to change. It started with small things. A comment here, a silence there. She didn't like how I folded Arjun's shirts. She preferred ordering dinner instead of eating my cooking. She wanted privacy, which I understood. But then, privacy became distance. Distance became walls. And before I knew it, I was living in the same house as my son, yet feeling like a guest. I remember one morning, it was raining just like today. I went to make breakfast, and the kitchen was locked. They had moved the coffee machine and everything to their room. When I asked why, Ria said, "We're trying to create our own space, Auntie." Her tone wasn't rude, just final. That's what made it hurt more. She wasn't cruel. She was just firm about not needing me. And I didn't know how to exist in a world where my son didn't need me anymore. I tried to adapt. I started staying in my room more, watching old TV serials, talking to my plants on the balcony. When they went out for dinner, I would light a small lamp near my husband's photo and whisper, "They're happy, Rajesh. That's all that matters, right?" But sometimes, even the lamp's flame flickered like it didn't believe me. Then came the wedding planning. Big house meetings, relatives, phone calls, laughter. And me, the quiet shadow moving between rooms, trying not to be in the way. I told myself, it's their time now. Step back, Asha. But the truth was, I still hoped. I hoped that one day, she turned to me and say, "Ma, will you help me with this?" That never happened. 2 weeks before the wedding, I went to her room with a small box. Inside was my wedding necklace, gold, with tiny pearls. I said, softly, "Ria, I want you to have this. I wore it when I married Rajesh. Maybe it will bring you the same happiness." She looked at it for a moment, then smiled politely. "Thank you, Auntie. But I already picked my jewelry. You can keep this safe for now." She didn't mean to hurt me. But her words felt like a door closing. The day she said those cruel words, about disappearing, wasn't even a fight. It was a quiet afternoon. I had just come back from the market with fresh flowers for the mandip. She was on the phone with her friend, laughing. When she saw me, she ended the call and said, "Auntie, we need to talk." I put the flowers on the table and waited. She hesitated for a moment, then said, "Please don't take this the wrong way, but I think the greatest gift you could give us for our wedding is a little space. Maybe you could stay with your sister for a while? Just until we settle in." Her words were careful, like someone handling a fragile vase. But the meaning hit hard. Disappear from our family, that's how it sounded in my heart. I wanted to ask her, why? What did I do wrong? But I didn't. Because somewhere deep down, I already knew the answer. Sometimes, love simply outgrows its shape. That night, I sat by the window and watched the rain fall on the street. Every drop sounded like a memory. Arjun didn't come to my room. He didn't ask if I was okay. Maybe he thought silence would make things easier. It didn't. The next morning, I began packing my things. Not because anyone asked again, but because I didn't want to be the reason their new beginning felt heavy. I folded my saris carefully. Each one carried a memory: festivals, birthdays, nights of laughter. I found an old photo of Rajesh holding baby Arjun, smiling at the camera. I pressed it to my chest and whispered, "You raised a good boy. He just forgot me for a while. Maybe one day, he'll remember." Then I locked my suitcase and left quietly. No drama. No tears. Just a quiet goodbye to the walls that had once echoed my laughter. Fade out sound, light rain, distant thunder. Soft piano resumes. That's how I disappeared. Not from the world, but from the life I thought I'd built forever. Pause, 3 seconds. But that was only the beginning of my story. The first morning after I left home, I woke up in my sister's guest room. The curtains were drawn, the sunlight pale and unfamiliar. For a moment, I didn't remember where I was. Then I saw my small suitcase by the door, and it all came back, like a bruise you notice after the pain fades. My sister, Meena, was kind. She made tea, brought breakfast to my room, and kept talking to fill the silence. But no matter how much she spoke, the house felt strange, not mine. I had spent my whole life being needed. Cooking, cleaning, caring, praying. Now, I was simply existing. Later that day, Meena asked, "Asha, how long will you stay? You know you can live here as long as you want." I smiled. "Just a few days. I don't want to be in anyone's way." It was a habit now, that sentence. I didn't want to be in anyone's way. Even when there was plenty of space. In the evenings, I would sit on her balcony with a cup of tea and look at the lights in the buildings opposite. Each window held a different story: laughter, noise, families sitting together. Sometimes I imagined Arjun and Riya among them, eating dinner, laughing at something silly. I would whisper softly to the wind, "I hope you're happy, my son." But deep down, I wasn't sure if I meant it yet. 3 days later, I got a call from Arjun. His voice was awkward, like someone walking on broken glass. "Ma, how are you?" "I'm fine, Beta. How's the wedding planning?" "Good. Just busy. Ria sends her regards." Regards. That word felt so cold, so polite. When did love become regards? "That's nice," I said quietly. "Don't worry about me. Just focus on your big day." "I will, Ma," he said. And then, before hanging up, he added, "I'll come see you soon, okay?" I nodded even though he couldn't see me. Of course. But he never came. The wedding day arrived. I wasn't invited. No one said the words directly, but silence has its own language. Mina tried to cheer me up. She said, "Let's go to the temple, Asha. Offer prayers. Maybe that will bring you peace." So we went. I wore a simple white sari, tied my hair neatly, and held a small bowl of flowers. As the priest began chanting, I closed my eyes. For the first time, I didn't pray for my family's happiness. I prayed for strength. To live without them. To breathe without bitterness. To forgive without being asked. When I opened my eyes, I felt tears on my cheeks. But they didn't burn. They felt clean. A week later, I got a wedding photo on my phone. No message, no explanation. Just one picture. Arjun and Ria standing together, smiling, surrounded by flowers and friends. He looked handsome. She looked radiant. And behind them, I noticed something small. The gold necklace I had offered her, the one she had refused, was around her neck. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I didn't know if it was joy or pain. Maybe both. I held the phone close and whispered, "You wore it, Ria. Maybe somewhere, you still remember me." Days turned into weeks. I started finding small routines again. Morning walks with Mina, evening tea, watering her plants. One morning, while sweeping the balcony, I found an old stray cat sitting near the steps. Thin, scared, with one torn ear. It looked up at me as if to ask, "Can I stay?" I smiled and said softly, "You don't need permission to exist here." That cat started visiting every day. I named her Chinni. And somehow, that small creature brought warmth back into my mornings. I started saving milk for her, talking to her as I fed her, telling her everything I couldn't tell anyone else. They're happy now, Chinni. And I'm learning to be happy too. She would just purr and rub against my legs. Sometimes, that was enough. A month later, I met Kavita, one of Mina's neighbors. A widow like me, in her early 60s. She invited me for tea one afternoon. Her house was filled with laughter, not from family, but from life. Books, old film posters, the smell of cinnamon and incense. She asked, "You miss them, don't you?" "Every day," I said. "But missing doesn't bring them back." She smiled kindly. "No, but it keeps your love alive. And that's something." I remember that line. It stayed with me. Because for so long, I thought love only existed when someone stayed. But maybe love could also exist quietly, in absence, in memory, in letting go. Weeks passed. I began writing small notes to myself in a diary, things I wished I could say aloud. "You are not invisible. You gave your best. It's okay to rest." It felt strange at first, like writing letters to a stranger. But slowly, I realized I was learning to be my own companion. One afternoon, I was sitting on the balcony again when Mina came rushing with her phone. "Asha. Look, Arjun's wedding video is online." For a second, I froze. Then I nodded. Show me. The screen played music, loud, happy. Ria walked down the aisle in red, smiling. Arjun looked nervous and proud. Then I saw something that made me smile for real. In the background, on the mandap table, there was a small silver frame. My husband's photo. They had kept him there. Even if I wasn't invited, Rajesh was. And that meant, a part of me was there too. I whispered softly. See, Rajesh? You still made it to our son's wedding. For the first time in months, my chest felt light. A few days later, a letter arrived. Yes, a real letter, not a text. The handwriting was messy, familiar. It was from Arjun. He wrote. Ma, I know things didn't go the way they should have. I should have spoken up. I should have visited. But I didn't know how to make peace between you and Ria. I hope you're okay. We're moving to another city next month. Take care of yourself. Love, Arjun. I read it over and over again. Not because it healed me, it didn't. But because it reminded me that even silence has corners of love hidden inside it. He still called me Ma. That was enough. That night, I took out my old diary and wrote. I can't go back to who I was. But maybe I can become someone new. Slowly, the ache in my chest began to soften. I started helping at the local library with Kavita. We organized reading sessions for children, told stories, and sometimes just laughed at how clumsy we both were with smartphones. Every time a child hugged me and said, "Thank you, Auntie," something inside me healed a little. Months passed. Ria never called. Arjun sent a message on my birthday, short but kind. Happy birthday, Ma. Hope you're doing well. I replied. I am. Be happy, Beta. It wasn't a lie anymore. One morning, I woke up early and watched the sunrise from the balcony. The sky was painted with orange and pink, colors I hadn't noticed in years. Chinni sat beside me, tail curled neatly, eyes half closed. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like something was missing. I felt whole. Maybe love doesn't always look like closeness. Sometimes, it's distance with peace in between. Soft music swells, hopeful tone. That was the beginning of my healing, slow, quiet, invisible to the world. But every morning, as the sun rose, I felt more like myself again. Fade-out sound, birds chirping, morning breeze. They say time heals all wounds. But that's not true. Time doesn't heal, it teaches you how to live with what can't be fixed. Months had passed since the wedding. I no longer cried at night. I no longer waited for messages that never came. My days were quiet, filled with small routines that began to feel like prayers. Tea at 6. Reading at 10. Watering plants before sunset. When you've lost everything you built your life around, you start to find beauty in the smallest, simplest things. A cup of tea that tastes just right. A stranger's smile at the market. A new leaf on a plant you thought was dying. That's how healing begins, quietly, invisibly. One afternoon, while helping at the library, I noticed a small boy sitting alone near the children's corner. He wasn't reading, just staring at the window. When I asked his name, he said softly, Ravi. Do you like stories, Ravi? I asked. He nodded shyly. So I opened a book, The Little Prince. And as I began to read, his face slowly lit up. From that day on, Ravi came every week. Sometimes he brought friends, sometimes just himself. I started reading to them every Thursday. At first, it was just something to fill my time. But soon, it became something I looked forward to. Their laughter, their questions, their tiny hands tugging at my sari. It made me feel alive again. They didn't care who I was. They didn't know my past. They just saw me, auntie who tells stories. And maybe, that's what I had been missing all along. To be seen without judgment, without expectation. Kavita noticed the change. One day, as we were closing the library, she said, "You've started smiling again, Asha. Real smiles this time." I laughed softly. I guess these kids gave me something to smile about. "No," she said, "you gave yourself that smile. Don't forget that." That night, I thought about her words for a long time. Maybe happiness doesn't arrive in big moments. Maybe it creeps in, through laughter, sunlight, and the quiet acceptance that life goes on. Then, one day, a letter came again. This time, not from Arjun. It was from Ria. My hands trembled when I saw her name. I almost didn't open it. But something inside me whispered, "You've faced worse." The letter was short. "Auntie. I hope you're well. I know it's been a long time. I wanted to tell you that I'm expecting. I understand if you don't want to see me. But I thought you should know. Ria." I read it twice. 3 times. Not because I was angry. But because my heart didn't know what to feel. Part of me wanted to be happy, my son was going to be a father. Another part of me felt a quiet ache, I would never be called nanny in their home. But after a while, that ache softened too. I whispered to myself. Life goes on, Asha. New beginnings don't always need your presence to exist. A few months later, I heard through Meena that Ria had given birth to a baby girl. I smiled. Somewhere far away, a new heartbeat had entered this world. And even if I would never hold her, I silently wished her a lifetime of warmth. That night, I lit a small diya near my husband's photo and said, "Rajesh, your granddaughter is here." Another chance for the world to be gentle. Around that time, the library announced a small storytelling event for the neighborhood kids. Kavita insisted I should host it. I hesitated, I had never spoken in front of a crowd before. "You tell stories beautifully," she said. "You just need to trust your voice." So I did. The day of the event, the small hall was full, parents, children, teachers. I stood in front of them, palms sweating, heart racing. But when I began to speak, something inside me clicked. My voice was steady. Warm. Honest. I told a story about a little sparrow who lost her home in a storm. And how she built it again, twig by twig, stronger than before. The children listened in silence. When I finished, they clapped, loudly, joyfully. And for the first time in years, I felt proud of myself. Not as someone's wife. Not as someone's mother. Just as me. Later that evening, a teacher came up to me and said, "Mrs. Asha, you have a gift. You should record these stories or teach. People would love to listen." I smiled and said, "Maybe one day." But that night, as I lay in bed, I thought. Maybe that day had already come. Weeks turned into months again. Seasons changed. The pain no longer ruled me. It lived quietly in a corner of my heart, like an old friend I had made peace with. One evening, while watering the plants, Meena came to me holding her phone. "Asha, there's someone at the door for you." I frowned. For me? When I stepped into the living room, my breath caught. There she was, Ria. Standing at the door, holding a small bundle wrapped in pink. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The world outside felt still, even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Then she said softly, "Auntie, may I come in?" I nodded. Of course. She sat down, nervous, eyes flicking between me and the floor. Then she placed the baby in my lap. Her name is Anaya, she said. It means, caring one. The baby was tiny, soft skin, closed eyes, peaceful face. I looked down at her, and tears filled my eyes before I could stop them. She's beautiful, I whispered. Ria smiled weakly. I wanted you to meet her before we move abroad. Arjun got a job offer in Canada. We're leaving next week. I felt my chest tighten, but not with pain this time. Just a quiet understanding. That's wonderful, I said gently. You'll have a good life there. Ria looked at me for a long moment, eyes full of things she couldn't say. Then she whispered. I'm sorry, Auntie. I could have asked for what? I could have said 1,000 things. About the necklace, the silence, the loneliness. But instead, I simply said. Be kind to yourself, Ria. And to others. She nodded, that's all that matters. Tears in her eyes. Then she hugged me, briefly, but real. The kind of hug that carries both regret and release. When she left, the house felt both heavier and lighter at the same time. I stood at the door for a long time, watching her disappear down the street. Then I whispered to the wind. Goodbye, my son. Goodbye, my daughter. Be happy. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, the moonlight spilling across the floor. The house was silent, but my heart was calm. I realized something simple but powerful. I had waited years to be loved again. But peace had been waiting for me all along. The next morning, I woke up early, made tea, and opened my diary. On a new page, I wrote. Peace doesn't come when others change. It comes when you stop waiting for them to. I looked out at the sunrise and smiled. A smile that wasn't forced, wasn't pretending. It was the quiet, certain smile of someone who had finally come home to herself. From that day on, I started recording my stories for children. Just my voice, a cup of chai beside me, and an old microphone Kavita found at the community center. We uploaded them to a small online channel. And to my surprise, people listened. Some wrote comments like, "Your voice reminds me of my grandmother." Or, "This story helped me fall asleep." And every message felt like a small piece of sunlight finding its way into my heart. I no longer needed a family to feel useful. I had found one in the laughter of strangers, the warmth of children, and the peace inside my own company. That was my turning point. Not a grand moment. Not forgiveness or reunion. Just a quiet realization. That I could live, love, and be whole. Even without being needed. It had been almost 2 months since the wedding. The laughter in the house had faded into short, polite conversations. My son, who once called me every day just to ask what I had eaten, now spoke in hurried tones, like someone trying to balance 2 worlds. Sometimes, I'd hear his voice in the living room when he came home from work. But I stayed in my room. I didn't want to interrupt them. I didn't want to give her another reason to look at me with that quiet irritation she wore like perfume. One evening, I decided to step out into the backyard. It had been my safe place for years. A small wooden bench under a mango tree, where I used to sit with my husband after dinner, sipping tea and watching the stars. I had planted that tree myself, years ago. Now, it was tall, strong, and beautiful, everything I had hoped my son would grow to be. As I sat there, I heard voices inside. Her voice. Sharp, frustrated. Then his, calm, tired. It wasn't my intention to listen. But sometimes the truth finds you, even when you don't want it. She needs her space, Daniel. She's not even trying to adjust. She's my mother, Sarah. She's old. She's trying. trying? She stares at me like I'm a stranger in my own house. You're overthinking it. No, I'm not. She doesn't like me. And you know it. My heart sank. Not because of what she said, but because of what he didn't. He didn't defend me. He didn't say, she's done everything for me. He didn't say, she raised me with love. He just sighed. A long, heavy sigh that sounded like surrender. I could almost see his shoulders slumped, his eyes tired, his heart pulled in two directions, one by duty, one by love. And in that moment, I realized I was becoming a burden, not intentionally. Not because I wanted to be, but because my presence reminded them of something they didn't want to face, a connection that couldn't exist without discomfort. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, the old fan spinning slowly above me, whispering its soft, tired rhythm. The walls felt closer. The air felt heavier. I whispered to myself, maybe love means letting go before they ask you to. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The sun hadn't even risen yet. I made tea for 3, a habit that refused to die. But when I placed the cups on the table, I noticed only 2 were taken. They must have eaten out again. I smiled faintly. It was becoming a pattern. I looked around the kitchen, the place where I had spent half my life. The smell of ginger and cardamom still lingered from the days when my husband used to joke that no one made tea like me. Now, it was quiet. Peaceful, but also painfully empty. I reached for my son's childhood mug, the one with faded cartoon prints, and held it close. I whispered softly, "My boy, you've grown so much." And then, I knew. It was time to do what love demanded, even when it hurt. That afternoon, while they were out, I packed a small suitcase. Just a few clothes, my medicines, and the framed photo of my husband and me on our wedding day. He was smiling so wide that his eyes almost disappeared. I used to tease him about that. I left the rest, the house, the furniture, the memories, where they belonged. This wasn't my world anymore. Before leaving, I wrote a note and placed it on the dining table. My dear Daniel. Don't be sad. Don't blame anyone. A mother's love doesn't end when she leaves. Sometimes it just changes shape. I'll be okay. Take care of her. Take care of yourself. Love. Momi locked the door behind me quietly. The sun was setting, the sky painted with soft pink and orange streaks. It looked peaceful, like a goodbye that didn't need words. As I walked down the lane with my small suitcase, a neighbor saw me and called out. Leaving already? Where to? I smiled gently and said. Just going where I belong. I took the evening bus to my old town, the one I had left years ago when my husband passed. The journey was long, but my mind was calm. I looked out the window as fields and lights passed by. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't thinking of anyone's approval. Only peace. When I arrived, I stayed in a small rented room near the temple. It was simple, 1 bed, 1 chair, a window with iron bars. But it was quiet. And in that silence, I finally heard something I had been missing for years, myself. Days turned into weeks. I started helping at the temple kitchen, serving food to strangers, washing plates, lighting lamps. The priest, an old man with kind eyes, asked me one day, "Are you looking for something, sister?" I smiled and said, "No. I think I've found it, peace." Sometimes at night, I'd sit outside and listen to the sound of the wind passing through the trees. I'd think of Daniel, wondering if he missed me, if he found the note, if he understood. But I didn't cry. Not anymore. Because I knew, love doesn't always mean staying. Sometimes it means stepping back, so others can grow without guilt. And I found a strange kind of happiness in that. One day, while helping a little girl tie her shoelaces outside the temple, she asked innocently, "Auntie, do you have a son?" I smiled softly. "Yes, I do." She looked up and asked, "Where is he?" I paused, feeling a lump rise in my throat, not of pain, but of tenderness. "He's where he's meant to be." She giggled, not understanding. But I did. I realized that I had been so focused on being someone's mother, someone's wife, someone's everything, that I had forgotten who I was when I was alone. And here, in this quiet place, with no one to please, no expectations, no tears, I was finally learning to be me again. Sometimes, at dusk, I'd light a small lamp near the temple gate and whisper a prayer for my son. Not for him to come back, but for him to be happy. And every time I did that, I felt lighter. As if a part of my heart that had been carrying sorrow for years was finally learning to float again. That was the moment I understood the truth. Peace doesn't always come wrapped in apologies or reunions. Sometimes it comes in quiet mornings, in the warmth of your own breath, in the calm acceptance that love doesn't have to be returned to be real. The mornings in the town were peaceful. The air smelled faintly of incense and wet earth after the temple staff cleaned the courtyard. A bell would ring softly, echoing across the empty lanes, calling everyone to prayer. That sound became my comfort. It reminded me that no matter how heavy a heart feels, the world still moves with grace, unbothered, unhurried. Each day, I woke up early, made myself a small cup of tea, and sat by the window. The same light that once fell across the kitchen of my old house now touched my hands in this quiet room. It was gentle, forgiving. For the first time in years, I didn't have to hurry. No one was waiting for breakfast. No one was watching what I did or how I did it. The silence was strange at first. It felt like being alone in an ocean, wide, endless, unfamiliar. But then, it started feeling like peace. One morning, as I swept the temple steps, an old woman named Radha came to help me. She was small, round, with a smile that could soften even the hardest day. "You're new here," she said. "Yes," I replied. "I came here a few months ago." "Running away from something?" I paused. "Maybe running towards something." She laughed softly, her bangles clinking. "Good answer. We all end up here for that." From that day on, Radha became my quiet companion. We worked together, ate together, and sometimes just sat without saying anything, the kind of silence that feels like understanding. She told me about her children, how they forgot her birthday 3 years in a row, how they argued about her old house but never visited her. I listened, and for once, I didn't feel alone in my pain. Every evening, a group of women gathered near the temple steps to sing old devotional songs. Their voices were soft, a little shaky, but full of emotion. They invited me to join one evening. I hesitated. "I haven't sung in years," I said. One of them smiled. "That's okay. Sing what your heart remembers." I closed my eyes and tried. At first, my voice trembled. But then, the words flowed out, words I had once sung to my son when he was a child. As I sang, I felt something loosen inside me. Something I had been holding on to, grief, regret, maybe even guilt. And as the last note faded, I realized I wasn't singing for anyone else anymore. I was singing for myself. Weeks passed. I began teaching the children who visited the temple, helping them read, draw, and write their names. Their laughter filled the courtyard. Sometimes, when I saw their small faces looking up at me with trust, I thought of Daniel as a little boy, his messy hair, his endless questions, his sleepy hugs. But I didn't cry. Because I had made peace with the fact that love changes shape. It doesn't die, it just moves to a different corner of your heart. One of the girls, her name was Mira, used to hold my hand every time she saw me. She'd say, "You're like my nanny, grandmother." And I'd smile. "Then you're my little sunshine." Every time she giggled, I felt something heal, quietly, gently, completely. One afternoon, while arranging offerings in the temple, the priest approached me. He held an envelope. "This came for you," he said. "No return address." My hands trembled slightly. I opened it carefully. Inside was a letter. The handwriting, neat, familiar. It was Daniel. "Mom. I hope you're safe. I found your note the day you left." I didn't understand then, but now I do. You left because you loved us, even when we didn't deserve it. I don't know where you are, but I want you to know that I think of you every single day. Sarah and I had a baby girl last month. We named her Ananya. She has your smile. I'm sorry for everything. Please know that I'll always love you. Daniel. My eyes blurred. But I didn't cry out loud. I just sat there, holding that letter close to my heart, letting the words sink into the silence around me. I whispered softly, "You finally understand, my boy." The priest stood quietly nearby. When I looked up, he said, "Do you want to go back?" I smiled faintly. "No. He has his life now. I have mine. Some love is meant to live from a distance." He nodded. "Then keep blessing him from here. That's also love." That night, I lit 2 lamps, one for my husband, one for my son and his new family. As the flames flickered, I closed my eyes and prayed. Not for them to return, not for time to change, but simply for all of us to have peace. And in that small moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: freedom. Freedom from the ache of waiting. Freedom from needing to be understood. Freedom from the idea that love must always stay to be real. The seasons changed. Winter brought cool air, warm blankets, and the faint sound of bells echoing through the fog. I continued my quiet routine, teaching children, cleaning, helping in the kitchen. People started calling me Ma Ji. I wasn't anyone's mother anymore, not in the traditional sense. But in that little community, I had become everyone's comfort. Children would run to me with stories. Women would come for advice. And every time someone said, "Ma Ji, you remind me of home," I'd smile, because I was home now. Sometimes, I still thought of Daniel. When I saw a young man carrying his baby on his shoulders, I'd imagine my son doing the same. When I heard a woman laugh softly beside her husband, I'd remember the old days when my husband teased me for burning rotis. But the memories no longer hurt. They had turned into gentle pictures I could visit whenever I wanted, and leave behind whenever I needed peace. One evening, I sat with Radha watching the sunset. She asked quietly, "Do you ever miss your son?" I smiled. "Every day. But missing him no longer breaks me. It just reminds me that I've loved deeply. And that's something to be grateful for." She nodded. "You found peace, haven't you?" I looked at the horizon. "Yes," I said softly. "Peace that doesn't need anyone's permission." As the sun disappeared, a cool wind brushed across my face. I closed my eyes, feeling the calm settle deep inside. Somewhere far away, a temple bell rang, slow, peaceful, eternal. And I whispered into the wind, "If you ever think of me, my son, just know, your mother is smiling." Sometimes, I sit quietly by the temple steps and watch the world move around me. Children run past, laughing. The wind rustles the leaves. A stray dog naps in the sun. Somewhere, far away, my son plays with his daughter, my little granddaughter, whose smile I will never forget. And I am here. Alone, but not lonely. Quiet, but not empty. I have learned something simple, yet profound. Love doesn't always need closeness. Sometimes, it exists in distance. Sometimes, it is in letting go. Sometimes, it is in the silent hope that those you love are safe and happy, even if you are not a part of their daily life. I have learned that peace doesn't arrive with apologies, that it doesn't wait for reconciliation. It comes when you stop waiting for others to make things right. It comes when you accept what is and find joy in the life you can build for yourself. I once believed that being a mother, a wife, a caregiver, meant always being needed. Now I know it also means being strong enough to step back. To survive the absence of recognition. To survive even when the world asks you to disappear. Some evenings, I light a small lamp by my window. I whisper a prayer for my son, my husband, my family, not because I expect them to hear it, but because it reminds me of the love that lives quietly inside me, still alive, still warm. I write letters I never send. I tell stories to children who will never know my past. I smile at strangers, laugh with friends, and sip my tea slowly as the sun rises. And in those moments, I feel a gentle certainty. I am enough. I am loved. Not because they say it, not because they show it, but because I choose to feel it. If you are someone who has been asked to step back, someone who has been overlooked, dismissed, or pushed aside, know this. Your presence, your love, your kindness, are never wasted. You don't need permission to exist, to heal, to live fully. You don't need anyone's approval to find peace. It is inside you already, quietly waiting. I once believed that the greatest gift for a family was to always be there. Now I know the truth. The greatest gift we can give. To our children, to our loved ones, to ourselves. Is to let go, and still carry love in our hearts. Even in absence, even in silence. Love remains. Peace remains. And life, beautiful, quiet, whole life, remains.